The text appeared on my phone while I was in the middle of a business meeting. "Mr. Reynolds, I regret to inform you that your brother has passed away." I stared at it, unable to process the words. My brother Mark? Dead? We hadn't spoken in almost 5 years, but he was only 38. My hands trembled as I excused myself, stepping into the empty hallway to call the number. "This is James Reynolds," I said, my voice barely holding together. "I just received a text about my brother Mark." "Yes, Mr. Reynolds. I'm Richard Dawson, attorney at Collins & Dawson. I'm handling your brother's estate." The man's voice was formal but gentle. "I'm very sorry for your loss. The coroner determined it was a heart attack, though given his age they found it unusual." Unusual. The word hung in the air between us. Mark had always been healthy, healthier than me, with my desk job and stress-filled deadlines. "When did it happen?" I asked, leaning against the wall for support. 3 days ago. He was found in his home by a local delivery person. I understand you two weren't in close contact, but you're his only living relative. 3 days. Mark had been dead for 3 days, and I hadn't felt anything. No disturbance in the universe, no premonition, nothing to signal that my only brother had vanished from this world. The guilt hit me immediately, crushing my chest. "There are matters regarding his estate that require your attention," Dawson continued. "Your brother owned a property in Port Hollow, Maine, a lighthouse and the adjacent keeper's house." I frowned. A lighthouse? Mark lived in an apartment in Boston. The lighthouse was a recent acquisition, approximately 8 months ago. According to my records, he purchased it for a surprisingly modest sum. It's quite historic, the Hollow Point Lighthouse, built in 1879. It's been decommissioned since 1998. None of this made sense. Mark was a software engineer, not some romantic preservationist. What was he doing buying a lighthouse in Maine? "I'll need you to come to Port Hollow to sign the necessary paperwork and take possession of the property," Dawson said. "There are complications with the estate." "What kind of complications?" There was a pause. "I think it's better discussed in person, Mr. Reynolds." 2 days later, I found myself driving up the coastal highway toward Port Hollow, a small fishing town clinging to the rocky Maine coastline. The October sky hung heavy and grey, the ocean to my right a dark, churning mass that crashed against jagged rocks. As I followed the GPS directions, I caught my first glimpse of it, Hollow Point Lighthouse, standing stark white against the stormy horizon, perched on a small peninsula that jutted into the Atlantic. Something about the sight of it sent a chill through me. Tall and solitary, it seemed to be watching me approach. The town of Port Hollow was exactly what you'd expect. Weathered clapboard buildings, fishing boats bobbing in the harbour, salt-worn faces turning to observe the stranger driving through. I found the law office easily enough, a modest building with a shingle that had been bleached by decades of sun and sea spray. Richard Dawson was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and the weathered complexion of someone who'd spent a lifetime by the ocean. His office smelled of old books and coffee. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Reynolds," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I wish it were under better circumstances." I nodded, taking a seat across from his cluttered desk. "You mentioned complications with Mark's estate?" Dawson's expression grew serious. "Yes." "The lighthouse property. There's something you should know before you take possession." He hesitated, rubbing his jaw. "There's been some local resistance to your brother's ownership of the property." "What do you mean, resistance?" "The lighthouse has a certain reputation in Port Hollow. Many locals believe it's—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Not a safe place. There have been incidents over the years." "What kind of incidents?" "Disappearances, accidents. Nothing definitively linked to the property itself, but enough to create a local superstition." He leaned forward. "Your brother was determined to restore the lighthouse, despite warnings. He spent a considerable amount of time there in the months before his death." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "Are you suggesting there's a connection between this lighthouse and Mark's death?" Dawson held up his hands. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply telling you what people here believe. The medical examiner ruled it a heart attack, but But your brother was found in the lighthouse keeper's house. According to the report, his expression was—" Dawson's professional demeanor cracked slightly. The responding officer said he'd never seen such a look of terror on a dead man's face. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. This is ridiculous. People don't die of fright. Of course not, Dawson agreed too quickly. Nevertheless, I felt you should be prepared for the reception you might receive in town. No one has stayed in that lighthouse for more than a few nights in over 20 years. Your brother was the first to try in a long time. He pulled out a thick folder and a set of keys. Here's all the paperwork regarding the property and the keys. The large brass one is for the lighthouse itself. The property is fully paid for and all taxes are current. It's yours to do with as you please. I took the keys, feeling their cold weight in my palm. I'll probably just sell it. Dawson nodded, but his eyes told me he doubted it would be that simple. One more thing, he said, pulling a sealed envelope from the folder. Your brother left this for you. His instructions were to give it to you if anything happened to him. The envelope was heavy, containing something more than just paper. My name was written on the front in Mark's familiar handwriting, slightly messy and slanted to the right. I slipped it into my jacket pocket, not ready to open it in front of a stranger. As I left the office, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of rain and salt. In the distance, the lighthouse stood against the darkening sky, its white tower almost glowing against the storm clouds gathering behind it. "What were you doing, Mark?" I whispered. "What did you find out there?" The lighthouse seemed to watch me, silent and waiting, as if it knew I would come. The rain was falling in heavy sheets by the time I reached the lighthouse. The narrow causeway connecting it to the mainland looked treacherous, waves occasionally washing over the lower sections. I parked my rental car as close as I could and made a dash for the keeper's house, my suitcase banging against my leg as I ran. The key stuck in the lock at first, as if resisting my intrusion. When it finally turned, the door swung open with a long, plaintive creak. The smell hit me immediately. Salt, mildew, and something else, something chemical that burned the back of my throat. "Mark?" I called out stupidly, as if my brother might answer from beyond the grave. I fumbled for a light switch and found one that worked, illuminating a modest living space. What struck me wasn't the dated furniture or the peeling wallpaper, but the evidence of my brother's presence. A laptop sat on the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers and notebooks, coffee cups with rings of dried brown liquid, a half-eaten energy bar. It felt like Mark had just stepped out for a moment and would return any second. I set my suitcase down and moved to the table, drawn to the research that had consumed my brother's final days. The top notebook was filled with Mark's handwriting, more frantic and less legible than I remembered. Equations, dates, and strange diagrams covered the pages, along with repeated references to something called the anomaly. A chill ran through me as I flipped through the pages. This didn't look like the work of the rational, methodical brother I knew. This looked like the scattered thoughts of someone becoming unhinged. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a crash of thunder that shook the small house. I jumped, my nerves already frayed. That's when I noticed the door at the back of the room, slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of spiraling stairs, the entrance to the lighthouse tower itself. Before I could investigate further, there was a pounding at the front door. I nearly jumped out of my skin, dropping the notebook. Through the rain-streaked window, I could make out the silhouette of a woman in a raincoat, hood pulled up against the storm. I hesitated, then opened the door. "You shouldn't be here," she said without preamble. She was perhaps in her late 30s, with intense green eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "It's not safe during a storm." "I just arrived," I explained, raising my voice over the wind. "I'm James Reynolds, Mark's brother." Her expression shifted, softening slightly with recognition. "Sarah Winters. I'm the harbour master." She stepped inside when I gestured, shaking water from her coat. "I knew your brother. I tried to help him with his research." "Research?" I echoed. "What exactly was he researching here?" Sarah glanced toward the lighthouse door, then back at me. "He never told you." I shook my head. "We weren't in touch. I just found out he bought this place." She sighed, removing her hood to reveal auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid. Mark was investigating the anomalies associated with this lighthouse. He believed there was something unique about the electromagnetic properties here. She gestured to the notebooks. He was brilliant, but he started going down rabbit holes that worried me. What kind of anomalies? Radio interference, compass deviations, electronic equipment failing. She hesitated. And the disappearances, of course. The lawyer mentioned something about that. Sarah crossed her arms. 3 lighthouse keepers vanished between 1892 and 1998. No bodies, no explanations. After the last one, they decommissioned the place. She looked me straight in the eye. 2 months ago, a local teenager on a dare went into the tower at night. He came out catatonic, still hasn't spoken a word since. I swallowed hard. And you think these events are connected to some kind of electromagnetic anomaly? That was your brother's theory. He thought there was a scientific explanation. She glanced at the lighthouse door again. In the last few weeks, he became convinced he was close to understanding it. That's when he started sleeping in the tower. Another flash of lightning, another rumble of thunder. The lights flickered ominously. Look, Sarah said, I just came to warn you. There's a reason nobody stays here. Whatever your brother found, or thought he found, it consumed him. I saw the change in him. She pulled a card from her pocket. My number. Call me tomorrow when the storm passes. I'll tell you everything I know. After she left, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. I remembered the envelope Dawson had given me and pulled it from my jacket. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal and a USB drive. The journal contained entries dating back 8 months, chronicling Mark's growing obsession with the lighthouse. The early entries were methodical, scientific, but as the months progressed, his writing became increasingly erratic. April 15th, the readings are off the charts during the midnight hours. The equipment can't handle the power fluctuations. Something is happening here that defies conventional physics. May 28th. The dreams are getting worse. I see the same sequence every night now. The spiral stairs, the light, the door that shouldn't exist. June 10th. I found it. The hidden chamber. The original blueprints never showed it, but it's there, behind the northeast wall of the lantern room. I need better tools to access it. The final entry was dated just 3 days before his death. I've broken through. God help me. I was right all along. The lighthouse isn't just built on an electromagnetic anomaly. It was built to contain it. But the containment is failing. I can hear them now even when I'm awake. Voices from the other side of the door. They know my name. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. This wasn't the brother I knew, the rational, skeptical software engineer who mocked ghost stories and superstition. This was the journal of a man losing his grip on reality. Yet something tugged at me, a memory from our childhood. Mark, age 12, waking up screaming from nightmares about a spiral staircase and a blinding light. Our parents had taken him to doctors who diagnosed night terrors that he eventually outgrew, or so we thought. Thunder crashed directly overhead and the lights went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I fumbled for my phone, turning on its flashlight. The beam caught something I hadn't noticed before, a fine white powder along the baseboards. I crouched down, examining it. Salt. A continuous line of salt around the perimeter of the room, only broken at the lighthouse door. A protection circle. Had my scientifically minded brother resorted to superstition? Driven by a mixture of dread and determination, I approached the tower door. It swung open at my touch, revealing the spiral staircase within. The air that rushed out was cold and smelled of ozone, like the atmosphere after lightning strikes. My phone's flashlight revealed worn stone steps winding upward into darkness. Against every instinct for self-preservation, I placed my foot on the first step. "What happened to you here, Mark?" I whispered. From above, impossibly distant given the height of the tower, came a sound that froze my blood, the faint, echoing voice of my brother calling my name. "James, I knew you'd come." My foot hovered over the second step, my body frozen between fear and disbelief. That voice, it couldn't be Mark's. My rational mind insisted it was just the wind howling through the lighthouse structure, distorted by the spiral of the staircase. Yet it had spoken my name with such clarity. "Mark!" I called out, my voice echoing up the stone shaft. No response came, only the persistent drumming of rain against the windows and the occasional rumble of thunder. I took a deep breath and continued up the stairs, my phone's flashlight casting eerie shadows that seemed to move independently of my progress. The staircase wound tighter as I climbed, the steps becoming narrower near the edges. I counted them unconsciously, 73, 74, 75, until I reached a small landing with a metal door. The keeper's access to the lantern room. The brass key from Dawson's office fit perfectly, though it turned with resistance, as if unused for years. The door swung inward with a groan of protest, revealing the lantern room, the glass-enclosed chamber at the top of the lighthouse, where the massive Fresnel lens once guided ships safely past the treacherous coastline. The lens was still there, a marvel of prismatic glass segments arranged in a beehive pattern, though now dark and dormant. Rain lashed against the glass panels surrounding the room, providing brief flashes of illumination with each lightning strike. The room smelled of brass polish and that same electric scent I'd noticed below, like ozone, but sharper, almost metallic on my tongue. Mark's research equipment cluttered the space. Laptops, monitors, what looked like modified Geiger counters, and other instruments I couldn't identify. All dark now, powerless in the storm. But what drew my attention was the northeast wall, where a section of the original brick had been carefully removed to reveal a cavity beyond. My brother's final journal entry flashed in my mind. The hidden chamber. The original blueprints never showed it. I approached slowly, the beam of my flashlight revealing a space perhaps 3 feet square, a compartment built within the thickness of the lighthouse wall itself. The interior was lined with some kind of metal that gleamed with an almost liquid luster, unlike any alloy I recognized. Etched into the metal were symbols that resembled mathematical equations, but with elements I'd never seen before. At the center of the compartment sat a small wooden box, weathered with age. The top was inscribed with what looked like a compass rose, but the cardinal directions were wrong. North pointed toward what should be northwest, and the other points were similarly skewed. My hand trembled as I reached for the box. As my fingers made contact, a static shock jumped between us, sharp enough to make me gasp. The pain was momentary, but it triggered something unexpected, a flood of memories that weren't mine. A ship lost in fog, its instruments failing. A lighthouse keeper in 1892 discovering the hidden compartment, his disappearance during a winter storm. A government team in 1945 resealing the chamber after the incident. My brother, face illuminated by a strange, pulsing light as he opened the box. I snatched my hand back, heart racing. These weren't hallucinations or dreams. They had the tangible quality of memories, as real as my recollection of breakfast that morning. Somehow, touching the box had transferred fragments of other people's experiences directly into my mind. I should have stopped there, should have backed away, gone downstairs, called Sarah or Dawson, or even the police. But the same curiosity that had driven Mark now propelled me forward. I needed to know. Steeling myself, I grasped the box firmly and lifted the lid. Inside lay a small stone, no larger than a golf ball, milky white with veins of luminescent blue that pulsed with a rhythm reminiscent of a heartbeat. The stone wasn't reflecting light, it was generating it, casting a soft glow that seemed to brighten as I watched. As I stared, transfixed, the blue veins began to move, rearranging themselves into patterns that reminded me of star charts, then neural networks. Then something that looked disturbingly like human DNA. A voice spoke directly into my mind, not Mark's voice, but something older, vaster. It didn't use words exactly, but somehow I understood. Observer, connected, brother of the previous observer. "What are you?" I whispered. "We exist between dimensions. Your reality intersects with ours at this point. The structure was built to maintain the boundary." "The lighthouse," I murmured. "It was built to contain you, to contain the intersection, to prevent dissolution of the boundary." A flash of understanding hit me. The anomalies, the disappearances. When the boundary weakens, transfer occurs. Your brother understood. He strengthened the containment, but the cost was high. My heart pounded against my ribs. Mark, what happened to my brother? Instead of an answer, I received another flood of memories. Mark's memories. I saw through his eyes as he discovered the stone, communicated with the entity, and came to understand the truth. The lighthouse hadn't been built as a warning to ships. It had been built as a warning to humanity, marking a thin spot between dimensions where something ancient had begun bleeding through. I saw Mark working feverishly to reinforce the containment, using his knowledge of software engineering to understand the mathematical patterns that could strengthen the boundary. And I saw his final night, how he had offered himself as a living component of the new containment formula, a human firewall. The truth crashed over me like the waves against the rocks below. Mark wasn't dead, not exactly. His consciousness had been absorbed into the boundary itself, becoming part of the mechanism that kept our dimensions separate. Tears streamed down my face as the final memory played out. Mark, standing in this very spot, the stone glowing brightly in his palm as he spoke the final equation aloud, his body collapsing, empty, while his mind transferred into the boundary. His last thought had been of me. Regret for the years of estrangement, hope that I might someday understand his sacrifice. The blue light pulsed brighter, and I felt Mark's presence, distinct from the ancient entity but intertwined with it. James. This voice, I recognized. I'm sorry. I couldn't let it break through. The consequences would have been catastrophic. Mark, I choked out, how can I help you? How can I bring you back? You can't. This was my choice, but the boundary needs maintenance. Someone who understands. The implications settled over me like a weight. You want me to take your place? No. The response came firmly. I want you to be the keeper. Visit, maintain, monitor. The formulas are in my research. I've simplified them. You can do this without sacrificing yourself. Lightning flashed, illuminating the lantern room in stark white. For a brief moment I thought I saw a figure standing opposite me. Mark, smiling sadly, his hand raised in farewell. I can't just leave you like this, I protested. You're not leaving me. You're finding me again. After 5 years of silence, we're finally talking, little brother. The stone's light dimmed slightly, pulsing in a slower rhythm. The boundary is stable now, but not permanent. It needs attention. Will you help? I thought about my life in Boston, my marketing job that I didn't particularly love, my apartment that never quite felt like home. And I thought about this lighthouse, with its lonely vigil and its extraordinary secret. Yes, I said finally, I'll help. I'll be the keeper. The storm outside began to subside, the spaces between thunderclaps growing longer. As if in response, the stone's light stabilized into a steady, gentle glow. Place me back in the chamber. Close it when you're not here. The formulas will show you when to return. I carefully returned the stone to its box and placed it in the metal-lined chamber. As I did, I felt a sense of rightness, of completion, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Downstairs, the lights flickered back on as power returned to the keeper's house. I made my way down the spiral staircase, my mind reeling with everything I'd learned. The universe was stranger than I had ever imagined, and my brother had given his life to protect it. In the kitchen, I noticed Mark's laptop had powered back on. On the screen was a document titled "For James," containing detailed instructions for maintaining the boundary, a schedule of when the lighthouse would need attention, and a personal note. I always knew you'd find your way here eventually. Some connections transcend time, space, and even silence. I'm sorry I couldn't explain all this in person, but in a way, I'll always be here with you now. Take care of our lighthouse, little brother, and know that every time you visit, I'm watching over you. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed everything clean. I stood on the lighthouse gallery, looking out over the endless Atlantic. Sarah's boat was approaching along the causeway, no doubt coming to check if I'd survived the night. I would tell her a version of the truth, that I'd decided to stay, to continue Mark's research, to become the new keeper of Hollow Point Lighthouse. The full truth would remain between my brother and me, a secret shared across the boundary between dimensions. As the sun rose higher, I noticed something extraordinary. The lighthouse, though officially dark for decades, was casting a shadow, not from any external light source, but from a soft blue glow emanating from within the tower itself, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it, but unmistakable to the keeper who knew its secret. "I'm here, Mark," I whispered to the light. "And I'm not going anywhere."